everyone. This is the Ego Project, and I am Lisa Heidel.
And I'm Cristine Seidel.
And today we are talking about the ego and the mystical today. Those things that are on the fringe that we really don't know about, that often get dismissed as woo-woo, which is a phrase I don't care for. And how that affects us in our everyday life and how we can utilize these tools to better ourselves, better our lives. Do you have anything to add there, Cristine?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is such a cool conversation because, really when we talk about ego is what has been conditioned to tell us who we could be, should be, would be, right? And mysticism kind of goes hand in hand with spirituality. And, we are such a diverse spiritual culture now across the world, right? But a lot of us were, we came into this world of our family of origins that was very specific as to what our spiritual foundation should be, could be, would be, for the most part. And if our family of origin wasn't, then, a lot of our cultures were, so I think this is a cool conversation to have now that we're such a diverse population spiritually.
Oh, I think so too. And I so agree with you that, so much of this dismissive aspect of spirituality, things that are mysterious and magical, they get, kind of marginalized and, only those people. But we have to remember that, in, Western culture, yoga and acupuncture and, Reiki, these were all considered, fringe many years ago. And
right, exactly.
Actually, pretty recently. And so as we're moving and evolving as people, I think we're going to see more people who are, grasping onto the mysterious and the magical, which I love because
and right. Well, and exactly. It's our imagination and it's of the internal world, right? Anything that is spiritual, mystical, magical, imaginative, creative, that all kind of it begins, its catalyst is internally, and that is where our ego dwells, right? So to allow the ego to put its barriers down and explore mysticism and spirituality without those constraints, wow, I mean, we probably could become a very collectively spiritual world if we were able to do that. So
well, and I think us embracing these mysterious aspects are really what these mysteries are. Intuition, like you said, that's internal. Our instincts, that's internal.
right.
Our emotions, we can't feel our emotions, we show our emotions,
Right.
We can't tangibly touch them, but we can feel them. And we have been so conditioned that we live from the head.
Yes.
This is the only place that things are happening. No, that is a processing center.
Correct.
Information is supposed to go in there and then we feel that. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. This is our information hub, our information and processing hub to determine what is actually going to come down into what we consider our authority centers, meaning this is information, I'm going to process it through. Is this something that I want to make decisions from or on? Yeah, but we make that from our bodies. So you're 100% correct. We live so much in our head. We're actually addicted to overthinking. It is constantly, giving us cortisol and adrenaline and putting us in this amped up, stressed out state, but we're addicted to that. So, we're seeing burnout, we're seeing all these illnesses that come from stress. So we have to start pulling ourselves back into the internal world, which is intuition. And so much of mysticism is an intuitively interpretable way of communicating with yourself through some kind of faculty.
Great. And now Cristine and I are going to talk a little bit about our little mysterious, mystical pleasures that we have embraced in our lives today. So Cristine, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about yours, and then I'll talk a little bit about mine, and then we'll discuss them. How's that? So you tell us about the little mystical thing, magical thing that you do that's mysterious and
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I am a big, proponent, a big practitioner of human design, which is a collection of several different modalities or Eastern traditions. It has a little bit of I Ching, it has Gene Keys, it has Kabbalah. So it has a lot of these Eastern traditions that is used to kind of create what we call a body graph or natal chart. And what that does is it kind of gives you a snapshot of how you were basically designed as you became one and came into this world. And so it really, a lot of people associate it with astrology, but it really has more of a scientific basis to it, because it does work a lot with a lot of different traditions and physics. So but I use that because, as a therapist, and it is not in and of itself a therapeutic modality. I use it very much in conjunction with internal family systems or DBT or CBT. It really does show our conscious conditioning or our conscious personality versus kind of our subconscious or our internal world. And, I'm not doing it justice, because it is a very kind of like, I don't want to say intense, but very descriptive type of theory. But I use it as a therapist to kind of take, the things that we do in the therapeutic room, which, when clients are sitting there, they're like, oh, yes, this is an aha moment for me. Conceptually, this makes so much sense. I understand, why I feel this way. I know what was going on in my world that, created this. But then we send them out into the world and they really struggle with, how do I attach to the work that I know I need to do, and how do I apply it? And so human design, not only for myself, because, I really started getting into it for my own understanding as I was working through some more therapeutic, layers, but, it also helps the clients really have a roadmap. Is how do I start checking in with myself? How do I start making decisions? How do I start understanding myself more as I'm doing this work?
Great. I find I'm using it and working with Cristine actually as a coaching tool as well. So I
Yeah.
see it very valuable in a therapeutic
Mm-hmm.
situation as well as a coaching situation.
Absolutely.
And it's been so insightful. Let me ask you this, Cristine. Our ego, especially that wounded aspect of our ego,
Yes.
tells us to shh, don't tell anybody, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
what ego work have you done around sharing that you use human design?
And I think that I did struggle with that a little bit, because, as a practicing therapist, we are very, we love research-based modalities, and we like that evidence-based, you know, um, practices that we can, file on insurance and send it away, and it's like a stamp of approval. And what I was finding out was that, intuitively I was kind of helping clients with more of pulling from different eclectic modalities, which is very typical as you become a seasoned therapist. And as I was using human design myself, I was seeing how it was streamlining a lot of my manifestation practices for myself and with my coaching clients. And then I started looking at it in conjunction with some internal family systems. And I struggled with really telling people what it was, because of the just because of it not being mainstream therapeutically. But I just kept having people come back and ask, my friend said you did this with them and I'd like to have that done, and can you work with my child on this now, can you work with my spouse? And the work I really had to kind of come to terms with, and a little bit was really, sitting with my chart too, and recognizing like part of my design is to come into this world and transform, people's understandings of how they move through this world, transform who they think they were to who they really are. And I couldn't do that unless I was transparent with myself. So I had to really work through who I was thinking I should be, could be, would be, instead of who am I really. And as if you look at my chart, I have that 3-6 line, and that 6 line is to be a role model. And so I cannot go into this world expecting other people to do things that I'm not doing myself. So that in and of itself, that ego work of who I am as a therapist versus who I am as a therapist, inclusively with coaching and healing and doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing. That was really important for me to kind of process through before I could move through it more confidently.
Wow, that's very powerful to hear that recognition, because so often, we go into career options for one reason, and to meet a need, to be of service, to create a product, whatever it is.
Right.
And sometimes the work is how we shift what we've entered.
Yeah.
Does that is so, I thank you for sharing that. And that's such a good reminder of learning more about ourselves, like through human design, can help us, not just become better us, but be of more service to the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just did a reel on this this past week of, we have areas in our life that we really have to sit in discomfort. And one of those areas is professionally. We have to sit with something professionally if we feel called to do that. If we're really, and sometimes that discomfort is, do I feel called to do this? Right. But we always have to sit in discomfort to be like, how do I need to grow in my capacity to do this better, or with more integrity, or with more transparency? And so if we don't have that discomfort, we're probably playing it safe, and maybe not really, maybe the discomfort is what I just said. We're really not supposed to be doing that. So to kind of, now volley it to you, which I think is really cool. Why don't you share with us kind of what your little, I don't want to say little, because again, we're really working on vernacular and not being dismissive of these things. And you can hear that, like, we're kind of conditioned to downplay it a little bit, but just like you've been a part of me allowing you to kind of learn a little bit about human design, you've been really impactful in what you kind of practice within mysticism, which was a very cool experience for me. And something, I feel like you're really gifted in doing, especially when people are in a place that you are sensing they need it. So do you mind sharing a little bit about your practice?
I will. And it's interesting because when you said mystical there, as in your description, I felt my ego get a little,
You
and
lit up.
it is, and also a little like, oh no, because I'm sharing this on a public platform, and a lot of people don't know I do this, and it's still rather new for me.
Right.
And so it's reading tarot and channeling. That's also part of it. For me, it's not for everyone, but it is for me. So I'll tell you a little bit about my tarot journey. I was traveling when the pandemic hit, and I was in a location that has a Canadian-US border. And so the border closed. And right before I came here, I, heard, go buy tarot cards. I've never had a tarot reading.
Right.
I was like, all right.
Wow.
I'm curious. Explore this. So before I came back to this location, not knowing the border was going to close, I had bought a deck of tarot cards.
Right.
And so when the border closed, I'm on a 5-mile stretch of land. There's nothing to do. Plus we're in a lockdown and I can't get out.
Right.
And wow, talk about panic. I mean,
Right.
truly, like, I was like, I'm in the most beautiful, panic room, right?
Right.
Because I'm 3 sides water, one side Canada. Okay. And so I started, learning the tarot and, really delving into the tarot cards, and it calmed me in a way that I never could have imagined. So talk about the universe and spirit working with you, right?
Right.
And so I started learning that, and I found that it really resonated for me. I do not believe it is a fortune telling tool or divination. Not for
Yeah.
me. There's other, gifted readers who can do that. I cannot.
Mm-hmm.
I read it as energy. I
Mm-hmm.
think energy
Mm-hmm.
comes through the cards as a tool, with the person that I'm reading, they're bringing their energy, I'm bringing it through me. And we can learn more about a situation that maybe they're struggling with. Maybe they're going through a transformation in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're at a crossroads or a fork in the road. And so we can delve into that and we can
Right.
look through the cards and the messaging to figure out what it is that could give them some reflection,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a
Mm-hmm.
new way of looking at something, a new way to address something. So that's really what I do with it. I use the tarot, I use oracle cards
Mm-hmm.
to clarify the messaging coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And, once again, when you're doing something that lights you up, that you feel
Right.
passionate about, you draw people to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've done readings for people in South Africa, in
Yeah.
Ireland, and England, just, in Canada, the US, people from around the world that have heard of, what I offer, and they reach out and, I share what I can. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that you mentioned, reflection, because I definitely want to circle back to that, because I think that that's something we have kind of processed through together when we've kind of, helped each other in the practices that we do. But what I'd like to know is, that situation occurred, and you say like a universe thing where you really felt called and heard, go by these, right? And never have participating in a reading, never have done your own reading. You just kind of, you followed that. And it did bring calm. So as the world started opening up and you did feel like you were supposed to provide this for other people, where did that settle with you? Because when you were getting ready to talk about it, you were like, you felt that conflict, just like I felt like that conflict before too. So where did the ego work, or where did the ego surface, and how did you process and really work through that?
That's a great question. It's still a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It is, because people judge. But I did notice a bit of a shift where when I first started, I was like, oh, people are going to think I'm ridiculous and I'm silly, and they're going to judge, and I, process through that. And then
Right.
I realized that when people would make a joke or dismiss it, I found myself going, oh, they just haven't awakened yet.
Mm-hmm.
And which was surprising to me, because not in a judgmental way, in a
Right.
very gentle, oh, they're not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little bit of awareness of, we are going that direction, we
Mm-hmm.
are wakening up, and I know they're woke, has been a little dismissive, but I think it is, we are becoming more aware
Mm-hmm.
of that we are spiritual beings. We
Mm-hmm.
are not just meat suits.
Right.
Right,
Right.
right.
Right. Right.
There is
Exactly.
a soul in there. There's something more than, you know processing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we know that on some level, we all know it.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
come into this world as spiritual beings filled with love, and
Yeah.
then through traumas and, conditioning and expectations, that gets contained
Yeah. It
very
does.
much.
And yeah. And I think that, the ego has to, I mean, it really has to navigate itself in order to protect us, right? And if we came into this world, as we come into this world, and we're just so pure and full of love and so authentically ourselves, and we start navigating into this world, without that ego protection, we wouldn't be able to make it. Like that pain would be so immense that we wouldn't be able to really continue, right? So the ego has done its job, but when it comes to mysticism and spirituality, the ego has separated us very much from that line of communication to the divine, right? And spirituality and mysticism, they really can be, they can be married. it doesn't have to be religion as spirituality and mysticism is magic, right? It gets to be that spiritually we come back to one, and we actually can pick through different things. And so when you said reflect, that tarot is a reflection, I 100% agree with that. When you did a reading for me, which I had never had one done either, I had a couple people reach out to me saying, hey, I'd like to do this for you. And I'm like, what? Because my upbringing was that was taboo, and it was immoral, and it kind of scared me a little bit, to be completely honest. But what I experienced with you was that there was no projection of anything, and you didn't even do much, or if any, interpretation. You were literally just a place of reflecting and channeling things. It was for me to discern what that meant for me, or what that could mean for me. And so all that was an ability for me to sit with what was coming to, and check in with myself, which we do not do that enough. Mindfulness tells us to come back to the body, but mysticism and a lot of these internally driven practices require us to come back to body and listen to what it's saying. Not just be there, but listen to things we may need to pick up that are already in our subconscious and that are trying to come to the consciousness. And so that was actually a very healing thing for me to do with you. And I really started processing it a couple days later. And I was like, this practice is done all the time, even within a lot of religious practices. People would, and I still do, open up your Bible and see what Bible verse comes to you. And why do you need to hear that? Right. So even as organized religion, we have practices to be like, what's coming from this message? Today's sermon. What did you get from today's sermon? Right. But culturally, it's been normed, whereas in the Western culture, a lot of the mystical things and formal religions like Catholicism has a lot of mysticism in it too. So I think what you provided for me was really an opportunity to see that reflective state that what does this mean for me. So I think that was really cool. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. And really, that's, I have no ulterior motive other than a conscious connection with the person that I'm sitting with, whether remotely or in person.
Yeah.
Because it is an energetic exchange. And, I think the thing that I've learned so much from doing tarot is the importance of asking the right questions. And I think, if we do that more and then listen for the answers, as an example, should I quit my job? If someone asked me that and we're doing a tarot reading, I'd be like, let's open that up a little bit to, what is keeping me from enjoying the work that I'm doing? What do I need to heal around this? And, the cards may tell us that it's boundary setting. Maybe you shouldn't be taking texts at 10 p.m. at night.
Right.
Or on weekends. Maybe you need to set some boundaries. And because it always brings it back to the person.
It does. Yeah.
It's not, and sometimes the answer may be that, it's not the right position for you, that you're not living your full truth in what you're doing or your passion, and then you can make decisions based on that. But it always comes down to asking the right questions and then listening for the answers. Yeah.
And I think that if you ever do participate in something that is considered mystical and something doesn't resonate or make sense to you, that's okay. Right? It doesn't, it is to be something that may make sense to you. And if you're working with a practitioner that is telling you, oh, this is going to happen, or this is what you have to do, then you're really not with a practitioner that is authentically using that connection of intuition and energetic exchange, they're in their ego. Right.
Exactly. And I always, try to communicate, I don't have a dog in this fight. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Like, I'm not in there with
Mm-hmm.
thinking, okay, I'm going to, you know, guide Christine so she'll do what I expect her to do. I have no
Right.
buy-in here.
Right.
It's just, getting the, information through the cards. And if you walk away and all you had was some fun,
Right.
it has nothing to do with me. Now, once again, if I start thinking, well, I told
Yeah.
them through, well,
Right.
I'm not telling you anything.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
cards are telling, right? That's the energy. Your
Yeah.
energy is telling you what you need to do. And then, any messaging that comes in that, through the cards. So I just think that, like you said, it's a good place to do ego work,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for me and the person receiving
Right.
the ego.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
I
agree.
always say, like, in the therapeutic room, I am a very intuitive practitioner, so I definitely sit and just, and if you looked at my body chart, you see I have a lot of open centers, but I definitely sit there and just energetically process, and receive the energy. And so you do kind of have to do and constantly keep up with that ego work, that you're not pulling anything of your own stuff. You're really just kind of like checking in and seeing, does this make sense for this person? Is this something that can be reflected back, right? So I think that the ego, actually, when we see people in the religious and or spiritual realm that are very kind of, I've got all the answers for you, come to me for healing, we see an ego that is not doing its work, right? It's almost exploiting, that world in order for it to be pointed back to self, when really mystical work is to kind of take ego down and be in an energetic communion with the person you're with, you know. And so I think that probably is why it gets some negative feedback, because other people have come in with egos. But guess what? We got those ego people out in the religious sects too, right?
Exactly. And that's the thing, there are so many different tools out there.
Mhm.
If tarot is not for you, maybe something else would be. But I just find that keeping an open mind,
Mhm.
is so valuable. And,
Mhm.
like with you, we were talking about before we started recording that I've witnessed you using your human design in such a powerful way.
Mhm.
And it's been such an amazing model for me to see you
Mhm.
using this. And can you talk a little bit about what you're doing yourself right now,
Yeah.
using your human design?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, honestly, I use, I've done, therapy since I was, 23. So it's been a little while. And, I really had some, family of origin and just some traumatic things happen, in childhood through my teen years. And I started therapy at 23, and I mean, I loved therapy. Like, it was amazing, but I, was in therapy for years, and I've continued to go through therapy and become a therapist and go through the master's program and continuing educations and all those things. But there was something missing. And I think it was just this intuitively, mindfully, like, roadmap of how to do this. Like, life should not be this hard. Like, it shouldn't be where I have to go to all these different places to just feel whole. Like, I need healing, I need healing here, I need therapy here, I need, right, like, I need something that to make sense. And so as I came across human design, I really learned a lot about, like, my type, which I'm a generator, which is, sustainable life energy to go out there and just and make things kind of happen that light me up. But I've also learned a lot about my profile, which is a 3-6, and the profile kind of talks about how you learn, kind of like subconsciously, how do you learn? things. And then how are you supposed to move through this life? And a 3 is what I'd really like to change some of these names that they use, but the 3 is called the martyr, right? And so the martyr kind of learns by trial and error, which is 100%, how I have learned. I've gone through a lot of really difficult things in life. And have I always gotten it right? No, but I learn from those difficult things, and then I shift and I try to do better, and then I try to do better, right? And the 6 is I'm here to show others how to do that for themselves. I'm here to transform and lead by being a role model. And so one thing it has really shifted for me personally, and full disclosure, like I use this in my relationship too, the way we've really come to a very healthy place by using human design in conjunction with a lot of our own individual work. But I learned that, my 3 line, which kind of bothered me when I first learned about it. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a, what show, here comes that, hot mess express. Let's just jump out of this play. Let's see what happens. Right. Which, I love parts of that, being adventurous and wanting to explore life and just, live life. But it has, kind of also bitten me in the ass too, right? But where it's really been helpful is it's taught me that I don't have to make change abruptly. Sometimes when you learn things, it allows you to make subtle changes that point you in the right direction. And I think that's the beauty of that 3rd line, is that through some of those, difficult, impulsive decisions, you actually become very wise in that discomfort, right? And so I've learned to really, like we were kind of talking about before our recording, when I'm ready to shift, I'm very patient in shifting now. So it means little by little, I turn the ship to go in the direction I want to go. And so much has been in the past just trying to turn the boat, and the boat capsizes and it's like, well, what am I doing in the water? So, that human design, and that's something that in several years of therapy, I have never even, it was never even disclosed to me, but by using human design for myself and now with my clients, how I have been able to streamline a lot of trial and error, which would have been nice, and, really understand myself a little bit more. So, going back to you, like, how have you, like, doing tarot, what have you kind of learned about yourself?
Well, so much.
Mhm.
I've learned to, once again, remove my ego
Mhm.
from interactions. The Gottmans have a new book out right now talking about conscious connections and bids for connection.
Mhm.
And I think it's really taught me the importance of being present
Yes.
with those bids for connection,
Mhm.
and being able to recognize what they are.
Okay.
It's taught me that my voice matters,
Mhm.
that I have something to share, in this realm. I didn't know I did. And it's opened me up to, I've always been a spiritual person.
Mhm.
Even as a very young child, I was always interested in religion, seeking that spirituality. I feel that I have found what resonates very much for me,
Mhm.
and on a spiritual realm. And I am open to other ideas and expansion to that. And it just has given me such a fun way to connect with other people. It's different.
Yeah.
And I feel very grateful for it. And I will do it as long as someone needs it. And as long as I feel like it resonates.
Right.
I don't ever want it to feel like burdensome.
Mhm. Mhm.
When I give it freely.
Yeah.
It comes from an authentic place, and in my heart, and I want to give that to people. So I'm so grateful for that. And I think everyone will find their thing if they're open to it. and they're
100%.
open,
Yeah.
to exploring different
Mhm. Mhm.
mystical aspects
Yeah.
of the world. I just think so often people, you just see the wall come up,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they shut down, and it's like, oh, you
Yeah.
just lost an opportunity to maybe learn something fun or something
Yeah.
different. And it really, it makes me feel very grounded in myself.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
and you said when you were talking about bids for a connection, I was just like, wow, what an awesome, holy place to be with somebody, because when people are coming to you, whether it's for play or for some introspection, they're coming to you with a need, right? And we talked about in healthy repair and in relationships, we talk about how healthy relationships come together and they say, hey, I want to be in a relationship with you. I have this need. And the other person says, hey, I'm happy to meet that need. Here's what I request, right? Oh, okay, perfect. And then you have this harmonious relationship. We have very short-term temporary relationships that are on kind of like, it looks like just an exchange level, but it's still a need. And when people are coming to you, they're really needing to be attended to and tuned into. So attuned to, right? And you sit in that space with them and meet a need. And we don't do that very often as a collective. I mean, you could be sitting at, lunch with a friend and you start telling them, they're like, how's your day going? And you're start telling them, they're like, oh, I have to tell you this. Listen to what so and so said, and so even when we show up with people that we have very, long-standing relationships with, we don't get attended to and attuned into very often unless it's very intentional. So I think, being in that space and channeling something to reflect to them is a need. And I think that's why, when we talk about the ego and mysticism, our ego needs mysticism just as much as our ego needs spirituality, because we are constantly trying to come back to true self.
Mm.
And if we can't sit with that is unseen and is of the internal, we can't fully come back to true self. And I think that's what you're picking up on when you say people just put a veil over their face or put that wall up. When you talk about it, is I'm not available. And it is kind of like one of those things where it's like, well, then there's almost now another barrier to coming back to true self, right? Because there's judgment, and that judgment is a wall of the ego.
Hmm.
So, I love this conversation because I know it's been, the mystical and the spiritual, and full disclosure, I love me some Jesus, but I also love me some human design, right? Like, and that's what I love about being in alignment and being intuitive with and in communion with the divine, is you get to feel truth and not have shame on the other side.
I so agree. And I find that the people who are seeking,
Mm-hmm.
those are my people.
Mm-hmm.
Those are
Mm-hmm.
my people.
Right.
Those who claim that they have it all figured out, who believe that they're living the right way, it's
Right.
the only way to live,
Mm-hmm.
and who tear down people who are living differently. Those are not my people.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Mm-hmm.
just not. We're not going to have, an in-depth, deep connection. I want to meet those people
Yeah.
who can teach me something, show
Right.
me something different, who are open to learning
Mm-hmm.
from me. Those, and hopefully one day, I'm an optimist.
Right.
I want the whole world to be open to that,
Yeah,
and that goes with
absolutely.
ego healing, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And we're so craving that right now. I mean, we are in like constant internal conflict with that of which we think we should be, could be, would be, and that of who we are. And I think people are craving spaces that can be held with care and concern, and attend and attune into people to be able to show them that there is more than what you think you should be, could be, would be. You do get to actually go down the road of knowing who you are and finding peace in that. And so many of these practices allow them just a glimpse into it, And, the more that we can provide that to people coming from a place of care, neither one of us, and not anybody who practices any of this, should ever come from a perspective of projecting our own stuff or doing harm to their clients, because that is, that is something, if there's harm, if there's some kind of things that don't feel right, then you're not in the right place.
Yeah. And, I love that you said that, because I think, as we were talking about, why we are a little anxious about, sharing this on a public platform is
Yeah.
that judgment that someone's going to, say something
Mhm.
belittling, or we're going to feel ashamed,
Yeah.
whatever those things are. And, but I find, tarot and psychotherapy,
Mhm.
human design and therapy, human
Yep.
design and, internal family systems, all of these things can be really good
Mhm.
partners.
Mhm.
There's a wonderful podcast, I'll put it in the description today, called The Tarot Diagnosis, and it's
Mhm.
two
Yep.
psychotherapists
Mhm. Mhm.
talking about tarot and
Yeah.
psychotherapy and how they've navigated the world using these tools. So once
Mhm.
again, I think we're going to see more of this. I think there's
I
some,
agree. Yeah.
I know that there's some amazing podcasts about human
Yeah.
design out there.
Mhm.
So, hopefully we're sharing it with more people who will, explore it, go out and seek out more information.
Sure.
But, once again, I'm feeling powerful.
Yeah.
I've said it. I
Yeah.
read tarot.
Yeah. And and Lisa, like I've said, you really attended and attuned to me in a time that I really needed to hear that, and to be, be given messages for me to reflect upon for myself. And I think that that's a beautiful offering. I'm curious, are you open to listeners reaching out to you for that?
That's a great question.
Put you on the spot.
Um, I feel that those who require or would like will find me.
Yeah.
And so, yes, if they feel that it's something that they're interested in, they can
Mhm.
reach out through the Ego Project website at theegoproject.com, and we can start a conversation and see if it's a good fit.
Awesome.
So, yeah, thank you for asking that question. It's
We'll
new.
see if you say that when we get off of here.
And don't worry, I could just cut this out.
Right, right.
But no, I mean, I think that's a good question, because I think we are supposed to use our gifts,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
how we choose to use them is up to us.
Mhm.
And but they are there to be used and to be utilized and to be of
Right.
service.
Mhm.
And figuring out how to do that in a way that is empowering to everyone involved, I think
Mhm.
is so important. But that's a great question, and
Yeah.
unexpected. I didn't see that coming. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that, you said the people who are supposed to work with you, the people who are supposed to listen to this, the clients that we're going to serve, they were all meant to find us in some way or another. And if, they show up and how they expected to work with us is different, then it's just a stepping stone to who they're supposed to work with or what they're supposed to find and whatnot. So, I think that that's being open to what is supposed to be is just part of that mystical journey.
Well, and I'm going to flip that coin around and turn it on you, because are you open to take human design coaching clients?
Yeah, I think that, being in the therapeutic room and incorporating human design from internal family systems healing perspective, and I use it a lot of times with hypnotherapy. I really like the integration. I would say that what I'm really working on more so and wanting to shift more into is using human design from a perspective of manifesting, so whether or not that is, life situations, career, finances, whatever, that's really where I'm wanting to use human design, and where I'm taking coaching clients on, therapeutic and human design. I got my hands full there, but I am enjoying working with people wanting to manifest, and or, hypnotherapy clients that have some fairly, persistent issues that are coming up, so kind of those types of clients. But the therapeutic component with human design, that's pretty much for the therapy room. But yeah, I'm always open to seeing what case comes in front of me and how I may be a part of that journey. So thank you for asking. I appreciate that.
Well, I think that's so important, right? Because, I could say, no, I'm not, they'll find me,
Mhm.
and, I'm not sure how, because I tend to flit around a bit.
you know, in
Chase me
Greece
down.
or Portugal, where is Lisa on the globe?
I tell people, I'm like, I'm not hiding. They're like, are you sure? Okay.
Because we couldn't find you. Sorry, I had to plug my computer. Speaking of disappearing, I just jumped off the screen.
That's okay. Oh, as always, Cristine, it's always such a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah.
And once again, I could talk for hours about this. I
I know.
love talking
Yeah.
about
Mhm.
mysticism and spirituality.
Yeah.
And, why not, right? We're here it's a playground.
It is. It really is. We take life way too
Way
seriously.
too seriously.
Yeah.
Let's just have some fun,
Yeah.
people.
Just
Serious.
don't always do it with a third liner who's like, let's do this for fun.
That's okay, because I'm a
Heretic?
heretical
Yes.
hermit.
Yes. So we got like quite the crew. We got the martyr role model, the heretic, and the hermit. I don't know what kind of party is going to go down, but
It's going to be a good
something's
one. It will be memorable.
happening.
Okay. All right, Cristine, anything else you want to add for the listeners today?
No, just that, we'll provide a few, resources down in the comments. If you have any questions about, some of these, or if you have something that, you actually participate in that you would like to share with listeners or with us, like send it over. We're always looking to bring guests on and see what we can learn in this big world of the ego and all the facets of life. So
Oh, thank you. I would love to meet other people doing other things,
mhm.
talking about spirituality, of course, other therapeutic modalities, really anything. We're pretty open. We like to learn.
Yeah, you know why? Because our ego is everywhere.
Let's hope it's healed. Okay.
Some yes, some not so much.
We're working on it. All right. Projects, right? All right, Cristine. So as always, adore you. And listeners, make sure to like and subscribe and send us your comments. We would love to hear about it. And take a look in the description box for any information that we mentioned today that you might be interested in. And we will see you next time.
That's right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.